You don't know what Juneteenth is? Bullshit! Sit down, get comfortable, because I'm about to tell you what Juneteenth means and what it stands for. First, we have to go back to 1863 when President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. What the Emancipation Proclamation pretty much did was ensure the freedom of all enslaved Africans in the southern states of the Confederacy, including Texas. But I must stress this. History has taught, at least what I learned growing up, that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation just to free the enslaved Africans in the South. But that was not true. This was the time of the American Civil War, and the Union was low on troops. So in order to get more people to fight in the war, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But see, prior to signing the Emancipation Proclamation, in 1862, September 22nd, President Abraham Lincoln told the southern states to end all the rebel fighting and to rejoin the Union. And if they did not rejoin the Union, all enslaved people in the Confederate southern states would be free on the first of the year, which was January 1st, 1863. Enslaved Africans were freed in the southern Confederate States of America, not the enslaved Africans that were held by the Union. Planters and slaveholders from eastern states would migrate to Texas to escape the fighting of the American Civil War. Many of them would bring enslaved people with them, increasing the number of enslaved people in Texas by the thousands by the end of the Civil War. Most enslaved people were living in rural areas. 1,000 enslaved people were living in Galveston and Houston, Texas. This map right here shows the distribution of slaves amongst Houston, Texas in 1860. By 1865, there was an estimate of 250,000 enslaved Africans in the state of Texas. This is now 2 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Despite the surrender of Confederate General-in-Chief Robert E. Lee on April 9, 1865, the Western Army of the Trans-Mississippi didn't formally surrender until June 2nd. On the morning of June 19, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger arrived on the island of Galveston, where he would take charge of 2,000 federal troops to go into Texas and enforce the emancipation of all enslaved Africans and Reconstruction, nullifying all laws passed by Confederate lawmakers during the war. The order given to Texas read as following: the people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive Order of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect military posts, and they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. And what they didn't tell you is the emancipation of all enslaved people didn't end until December 6th, because there were still enslaved people in Delaware and Kentucky even after the enslaved people were freed on June 19th in Texas in 1865. And that came about because the 13th Amendment was ratified. Just a year later, June 19th of 1866, the freedmen in Texas would organize for the first annual Jubilee Day. Why you no longer hear about this and now it's called Juneteenth, you might ask? Because of the Jim Crow era. Once we got into the Jim Crow era, Juneteenth pretty much was no longer a thing. All Confederate states now started passing laws to disenfranchise black people. Then came the Great Depression. The Great Depression forced black people off of farms and into cities to find jobs for work. But you would see a revival of the celebration in Texas from 1936 to 1951. In 1936, an estimated of 150,000 to 200,000 people would join in Dallas, Texas for the Juneteenth celebration. In 1938, the governor of Texas, James Allred, would issue a proclamation statement stating in part, Whereas the Negroes in the state of Texas observed June 19th as the official day for the celebration of emancipation from slavery. And whereas June 19th, 1865 was the date when General Gordon Granger, who had command of the military district of Texas, issued proclamation notifying the Negroes of Texas that they were free. And whereas since that time, Texas Negroes have observed this day with suitable holiday ceremony, except during such years when the day comes on a Sunday, when the governor of the state is asked to proclaim the following day as the holiday for state observance by Negroes. And whereas June 19th, 1938, this year falls on Sunday. Now, therefore, I, James V. Allred, governor of the state of Texas, do set aside proclamation the day of June 20th, 1938 as date for observance of Emancipation Day in Texas, and do urge all members of the Negro race in Texas to observe the day in a manner appropriate to its importance to them. There would be 70,000 people who would attend a Juneteenth jamboree in 1951. From 1940 to 1971 came the Great Migration, where African Americans would leave states like Texas, Louisiana, pretty much all southern states that they originally resided in, to go north to find better jobs and better income. Black people started taking Juneteenth from Texas to places like Los Angeles, Seattle. It just went everywhere. In 1945, Juneteenth was introduced to San Francisco from a migrant from Texas, and that migrant name was Wesley Johnson. Then during the 1950s and the 1960s, you would see the birth of the Civil Rights Movement. With the Civil Rights Movement came another decline of the celebration of Juneteenth, though it was still being celebrated in Texas. So if you hear someone say Juneteenth, or it's coming around the time of June 19th, now you know the history of Juneteenth. A time in history where enslaved people were still enslaved after they were set free by the president through the Emancipation Proclamation in the state of Texas. But moving forward, African Americans, Black people, have found a way to celebrate this day and find a way to find some kind of happiness and joy and come together on such a historic tragedy that happened in our history. Now you know, as long as we track it.